Hey horror fans, welcome back to Room 237, and I'm going to finish off tonight's reviews with the first to another Hammer series. And this one is The Mummy from 1959. I believe there's 4 or 5 films in this series. I only have this one and the second one, so I'll get to that one as well. The Mummy came out in 1959, so right in the beginning of Hammer's emergence of horror, color horror films. And of course, it starred Peter Cushing and Christopher Lee, as did, 1957's Curse of Frankenstein, 58's Horror of Dracula, and now The Mummy. Also, I think at that time, I think there was also there was a Frankenstein film in 58, 59 as well. At least 58, I do know that. There was Revenge of Frankenstein in 58, which also had Peter Cushing. So, this movie really just helped solidify Cushing and Lee as the new Karloff and Lugosi, with Cushing being the protagonist and Christopher Lee playing Karras the Mummy. Because this is not a remake of the 1932 Boris Karloff film. It's more of a remake of Universal's series of films with Karras the Mummy and the Princess Ananka. And I have to say, this is the best Mummy movie since the Karloff one. That one's still my favorite, but this one was way, way better. As far as the Karras series goes, this one was better than its Universal counterpart. It was directed by Terence Fisher, of course, produced by Michael Carreras, of course, screenplay by Jimmy Sangster, of course. So you had the usual suspects. You had the usual gang of members working on this film as you did all the early Hammer films. And I really like the look of Christopher Lee as Karras. And I don't know, because I know Christopher Lee was cast as Frankenstein's monster for his intimidating height, which this movie shows his height as well, especially when we first see Karras emerge out of the mud. I'm not sure, because this is the R-rated. I'm looking at Valentine, Jesus Christ. Yeah, this says not rated, but apparently there were longer scenes of Karras's tongue being cut out during the whole story of Karras and who he was. And there was a shotgun death that was more graphic, but it was trimmed by the British censors. I don't know if they were ever restored. This is a much older DVD. Like, this is a 2001 DVD. I mean, the snap cases. But it had the original cover, and it was the cheapest way to get it, and I just wanted the movie, so I got it this way. But, I guess the documentary, I had Flesh and Blood, the Hammer Heritage, which I don't think I ever reviewed. It's been a while since I've seen it, but it was actually Peter Cushing's idea to drive the spear through the mummy because of this poster. He saw this poster with the light shining through it, and he thought that there should be some sort of um, full penetrant kind of, or full penetration kind of wound on the mummy. And this was actually one of the best received, or the best received of any mummy film ever made. It holds a very rare 100% on Rotten Tomatoes. And I can see why, especially in comparison to the Universal films, even the Karloff one. I mean, the Karloff one, I really don't know which. That one might have bias because Karloff is in it and it's early 30s. It's more what I'm into, but this one does do everything just as well, if not better. We do get the actual mummy as a monster, not, like Karloff, we saw him as a decomposed mummy for a few very short scenes. But it also did very, very, very well with the set design, costumes, really immersed in Egypt. It really felt like Egypt, especially during the backstory on Karis, where we see Christopher Lee in full Egyptian garb, and he did a great job with that too. This one's actually a mixture of, it's actually, it takes its plot from the first three films, actually. Mummy's Hand, Tomb, and Ghost. Well, the plot is from Mummy's Hand and Tomb, while the climax is pretty much the same as the Mummy's Ghost. The second film that I have is Curse of the Mummy's Tomb, and then I know there's the Mummy's Shroud, and one or two other ones I can't remember. I think those ones are more so original Hammer ideas, but this one pretty much takes the first three of the Universal Karis mummy films, condenses it down to the essentials, and really should have just done what the Universal films did. Because if you go to my Universal or my Golden Age playlists and you watch my mummy reviews, you'll see I'm not the biggest fan of that series. 8 minutes in, I gotta get to the story. So basically, it's 1895. Peter Cushing plays John Banning, which, if I remember correctly, that was the name of the archaeologist in The Mummy's Hand. But he's with his father and his uncle. They're searching for the tomb of the princess and the high priestess god of the Karnak. Peter Cushing has a broken leg, so he can't really accompany everyone, but they always come to him with their findings. It brings back the character of Mehmet Bey. This one played by George Pastel. Warns them not to go in once they find the tomb because of the fatal curse, but of course they do anyway. They discover Ananka, and pretty much similar to the other films, Bey resurrects Karis and has him go after people of the dig because he's the protector of the princess. Actually, they find the Scroll of Life and read it, but then Peter Cushing's father they find in a catatonic state. We jump 3 years ahead, so now it's 1898. We're in England. He comes out of a catatonic state. When they read the Scroll of Life, it brought back Karis. Who, of course, is the guardian of Ananka. And, yeah, basically, Bay sets Karis loose on the Banning family and people involved in the archaeological dig. There is one part where Karis is... It's not his tomb, because he's in, like, a wooden box, like a crate. It falls off this carriage into this deep mud. So when Bay reads the scroll to resurrect him, we see Lee rise out of the mud. And the way they do it is so well, because it's like, almost like, is it Martin Sheen in Apocalypse Now doing that? It's like, he rises perfectly, and then with every step, we see more and more of him come out. And like I said, with how we got the role of Frankenstein Monster for being intimidatingly tall, he looks tall as shit in this. And he looks great as Karis, the mummy. You know, his scenes, of course, his scenes with Peter Cushing. Cushing, absolutely, every role he does, he just does it with class and conviction. Like, Cushing gives an Oscar-winning performance no matter what he's doing. Even in Tales from the Crypt, where he just plays a silly guy that entertains kids, and everyone dislikes because he's poor. But then eventually, of course, we get the snow melting. Eventually we do get, you know, the history of Karis and how he tried to bring back Ananka and all his sacrilegious, blasphemous ceremonies he tried to do, how he was mummified alive. I really like the sets and the costume design and Christopher Lee's performance as Karis in those flashbacks. I think they did a great job with him. And I know it sounds like I'm not really going in depth with the story, because I've already talked. It really is the first 3 Universal films put into this one, but done in the style of Hammer. That's really what it is. And just, it's with better performances. It's at a much better pace. It really takes the important parts of those 3 films, puts them together to make one interesting, concise film. So based on that alone, you know, that it took the interesting bits from 3 not so interesting films and made one interesting movie. And again, I've never really been a big fan of the Mummy as a monster. I like the Karloff film. I like the Mummy's hand okay, but the rest I didn't really care for. There are bits I like in each one, but they're more or less just the same thing done over and over and over again. This one really made a good, scary mummy movie. The fact that it is written by Jimmy Sangster, produced by Michael Carreras, directed by Terence Fisher, and starring Peter Cushing and Christopher Lee in the respective roles. Peter Cushing, I mean, he's really good at being evil in the Frankenstein films, but if he's going to be with Christopher Lee, he's better as the protagonist, because Lee is just good at being evil. And I I did enjoy this film. A lot more than the Universal ones, I can say that. But anyway, I know I'm pretty tired. I know it didn't sound like I went into a lot of detail, but that's because it is very similar to the plots of the first three films. So it really just talked about everything else: the direction, the the production, the costume design, set design, everything like that. This movie is very much worth checking out. And it's pretty surprising if you saw how much I didn't really care for the Universal Mummy films and how I don't really care for the monster, the mummy, at all. But apart from like the first Dracula and Frankenstein film of Hammer, this is actually one of the best Hammer films I've ever seen. It's better than almost all the Dracula and Frankenstein sequels, and I'd probably say it's better than the first werewolf movie, which I have to rewatch because I fell asleep halfway through it. But I was impressed by this movie. Definitely worth checking out. And if you like the mummy films in general, definitely check this one out because, in my opinion, this one is way better and definitely worth it. Definitely check this out. But anyway, thank you for watching.